God can, and sometimes He doesn't, but sometimes He does. In the first part of this message series, we looked at the times where God has the ability, because He really can, but He chooses not to. And that demonstrated ultimate restraint, having the power to do it, but then choosing not to because there is a greater purpose, which is a beautiful picture of how God operates. And in this message, we want to look not at ultimate restraint that God exercises, but we want to look at ultimate surrender, which He is calling for us to exercise. So thank you for joining with us on this online message, and I really do pray that you will take this challenge and say, God, I can see that you really can, and I want you to. So when we get to that point where we realize that we just can't, well, sometimes that's the place that God needs us to be before He shows that He can. The Lord said this to His disciples in Matthew 19, verse 26. He had just shared a story with them, and they were standing there like, how does a camel pass through the eye of a needle? Like, how is the rich person going to enter into God's kingdom? Like, this is really difficult. And the Lord's reply to them, Jesus looked at them and He said to them, with men, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. And that is the realm that God operates in. He operates in the impossible realm. And He shows, but I'm much bigger and I can. So when we look at life and we say, but there are so many situations that we would not want. There are circumstances within our lives and things that happen, and there are decisions that need to be made, or the unknown, or just how life starts working. And we're saying, but I don't want it like this. I want to change it, and I think I can. Well, we looked in the first message about King Hezekiah and the situation that he found himself in, and how God used a single angel to change that whole situation. So King Hezekiah is a fascinating character in the Old Testament, and he was a king at a very difficult time in the Jewish nation's history. So he was coming after many, many other kings, and they had not followed what they had said they would do. They had not followed God's instructions and commandments and laws. They had broken them. And here comes King Hezekiah, and he was young when he was inaugurated as a king, 25 years old. And during his reign, some incredible things happened. But I want to focus really on what the Bible says about him, because these are his credentials. In 2 Kings chapter 18, from verse 2 through to verse 7, this is what it says about King Hezekiah. It says that Hezekiah did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. He trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, and nor who were before him. The Lord was with him, and he prospered wherever he went. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. So that's why King Hezekiah found himself in the situation that he was in. He found himself there because he was more willing to do what God wanted him to do than what the king of the world wanted him to do. At that time, the king of Assyria was the most powerful. And so he was putting a lot of pressure and trying to enforce himself and his gods on Israel. And so King Hezekiah finds himself with that choice. Well, do I serve the Lord or do I serve the king of Assyria? And to him it was a simple choice. But it landed him in a very difficult situation. So when King Hezekiah gets to the point that the whole of the nation has been taken captive, the whole of Israel, the cities have been destroyed, and now here is Jerusalem. And it's sort of like the last stronghold, and they've fortified the walls and they've done all that they can. And King Hezekiah literally is at the point where he's like, I'm done. I can't do any more. I've done everything that I can do, and it's not working. But I still want to serve the Lord. In Isaiah 37, the very first verse, when King Hezekiah gets the news that the king of Assyria is now going to attack, this is how he responds. And so it was when King Hezekiah heard it that he tore his clothes and he covered himself with sackcloth and he went into the house of the Lord. In that moment, what did he do? He knew exactly, I know where I'm going to find the answer to this situation. It's not in anything that I can do. He didn't call for a council meeting. He didn't call all the leaders of Jerusalem to come together and say, guys, we need to come up with a plan. He tore his clothes and he went into the house of the Lord to go and seek the answer from the Lord. Shortly after that, the Assyrians sent another message, and now it was in writing. And just a little bit further on from verse 14 in that same chapter of Isaiah 37, I encourage you to go and read that section from verse 14 through to verse 20 and to see King Hezekiah's response when he gets this letter. And again, he takes it and he places it in the temple. He goes to the Lord and he says, Lord, this is what they are saying. What do you want me to do? And I read just the last part of verse 20 from that section. And this was King Hezekiah's heart. He says, Lord, I want you to answer this because this is the ultimate outcome of the situation. It's not that the city is saved. It's not that this problem is solved. This is the ultimate outcome. Now, therefore, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are the Lord, you alone. And that is the work that God ultimately wants to do. So I don't know how many times we will go to him and say, Lord, please, can you fix this? Please, can you help with this? Please, can you do this? And he says, yes, I can do that, but why are you asking me to do it? Are you asking me to do it just so that your problem is solved? Or are you asking me to do it so that I am seen, that I am God alone, only me? Because I can solve it in the way that you want me to, but then it's going to look like you solved it. But if you want me to solve it, well, that's a different path. And so that's what we really want to go and discover, because that was the unexpected path that Hezekiah then had to journey. So when he goes into the temple and he lays it there before the Lord and he says, Lord, please, I need your help. He had no idea that night that God was going to send the angel into the Assyrian army and kill 185,000 soldiers. But that wasn't the end of that story. That was just the beginning. That was God saying, but Hezekiah, this is what I can do to solve this. Because what he also did was he caused a rumor back in the king of Assyria's hometown of Nineveh. He had caused a rumor that caused the entire army and everybody to retreat and go back because they were now fighting wars on multiple fronts. So how was King Hezekiah going to do that? But that's also not the end of it, because shortly after that, the king of Assyria goes into his pagan god's temple to go and worship his pagan god that he had made himself with his own hands. He knew this. He goes there to worship as if this god has power. And two of his sons come into the temple and assassinate him whilst he's worshiping his god. And the irony of that, I tried and piece it together, but it is so ironic that the king of Assyria was going to Hezekiah saying, your God can't save you. I have defeated all the other gods. Why do you think that your God can save you? And the irony that he is in the temple of his God. And not when an army comes, but his own sons. So your God can't save you from even the people that are closest to you. And that was the end of the king of Assyria's attack at that stage on Jerusalem. So King Hezekiah saw, but God can. And he can do this in a way that I can't. So I asked the question, well, what was Hezekiah's role in all of that? In the final outcome of how this played out. So your city is besieged, you don't have an answer, you can't see how this is going to change. What was his role in the final outcome? Surrender and pray. That was it. He got to the point where he said, I can't. But God, I know that you can. And I'm willing to let you do it. And that's a difficult place to be. As we look at this, I know that you and I in our decision making and in trying to live life, we want to see God work. And I can't give you the answer. I can't tell you how God is going to work in your life and the specific detail of what he's going to do. I can't tell you, just follow this recipe and then everything's going to be fine. It doesn't work like that. But I do know that there are key ingredients. And those key ingredients remain the same throughout all the stories in the scriptures. And so when we have decisions to make, and no matter how much you know about the decision, no matter how many options you might have, there are so many that you don't know. There are so many options that you don't have. So we approach our decision making and we say, well, I can contribute to this problem in this way. And I can control these things in this situation, and I can try and get it moving in this direction so that we can achieve this outcome. That's how we can do it with the things that are in our control. And what's the other option? The other option is God can, on his terms and in his time. And that answer looks so different. Because the purpose of that answer is so that not just you and I realize that the Lord is God, him alone, but so that others do as well. That he is able to do the impossible. So when we allow God to do that, well, it's that I get to be a part of his story. And that's the strange thing, is because we will always be a part of God's story. But my question is, am I a part of it because I'm trying to work against it? Because ultimately God's will is going to be done. Like, there's no other option. But am I going to be a part of his story in allowing my story to align with his? Or am I going to be the one that is working like the king of Assyria in trying to do my own thing, create my own path? And to align with God's story, well, that's that ingredient that is necessary, the ingredient of surrender. So in our decision making, and please, this is not, this is purely like first level thinking. It's not conclusive in any way. It's a very simple illustration. And I want to use sort of one-dimensional, two-dimensional decision making in my understanding of it. So in 1D decision making, it's just me as an individual and I have a choice to make. So it is a single person with a single choice, and there is a single outcome. So that's just linear, it just follows. And I think the majority of our day-to-day decisions are going to be like that, the small, inconsequential decisions. But then you also get to 2D decision making. And in that, well, now it's two people making a choice, and there could be more than one option. So now those two people each have to make their own choice, but there's an agreed outcome. So when you do that, the two people are going to experience it differently, and they're going to contribute differently. So that's almost like a picture of marriage. So it's two individuals, one can't make the other one's choice, yet you are going in the same direction and you're sharing that outcome. So that all happens like at the same time. Now, you will understand that I used marriage as the example, and I'm trying to simplify the decision making, and now you're starting to see, yeah, it's not that simple. No, it's not. Not even the 1D decisions. Then we get to 3D. And I'm saying, so now 3D decision making is when you have not two people, you have multiple people. And there are multiple decisions to be made. There's multiple inputs, multiple choices. There are multiple possible outcomes. In fact, even once most of the choices are made, some outcomes will be immediate. You will see the benefit of the choices, and others you're not even going to see the benefit of those choices. So the outcome is deferred to a much later time. So that level of decision making is when you start looking at like a company, you start looking at like a church or a country. Well, it's a very complex thing. So we go from 1D, 2D, 3D, and then we get to GOD. And then we ask, okay, so how is God making decisions? What level is he operating on? How do we possibly even begin to try and understand that? So when God is making decisions, well, he has infinite options because he is able to create and he knows all. When God is making decisions, he is using all people across time, from the past, the present, and the future, in working this all together into a single plan, one goal. When you see that God uses both our poor choices and our good choices, how do we even start to understand that? That he will use the choices that are seemingly negative and bad, and he will work them together for the good. That he is able to use one person's life, one story, one scenario. He's able to use that same thing multiple times across the space of time itself. So he can take a story that happened and it has an immediate purpose, but then he uses it again and again and again, and each time it has a different purpose, but it's the same story. Like, that is the level that God operates on. And when you look at it like that, what is the ultimate goal? Well, it's what King Hezekiah said in the end of his prayer. That all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are the Lord, you alone. And that cannot be stopped. That is God's ultimate purpose. That every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is God. And so when we see that if that is the ultimate goal, well then how do we align with that? And that key ingredient of surrender, well, that is how you get onto the path. And I want to look at the possible ways of us getting to the place of surrender. So the one is a purely difficult pathway, and the other is perhaps difficult and maybe more by choice. So the first pathway is, how do we get to the point of surrender? It's often because of life's circumstances and because of consequences of previous choices. So that's when you end up in the gutter. And I don't know where your gutter is. I'm still finding mine. So there is a point where life just gets really difficult and you're like, no, I've had enough. Like, I'm done. But where is that point? So circumstances are going to get you there. Life is going to get you there. And as you go further and further and further into the gutter, the lower you go, well, the easier surrender becomes. Until at some point you are so low that surrender is really appealing. You get to that point where like, okay, I'm all out. I don't have any more options. I can't. And it's like, okay, now I'm ready because God can. And that is a very difficult path. That is a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. But ultimately, surrender, when the desperation is high, well, that's when surrender is an option. But the other way to get to that place of surrender is not just purely through circumstances and consequences. This can also be by choice. And that's where you can take yourself and your own desire to control and to please yourself, to serve yourself, your own concept of yourself that is elevated, and you can say, okay, that's not godly. So what I need to do is I need to work on who God says I am, and I need to understand. So just like John the Baptist says, he must increase, but I must decrease. So when my sinful picture of self that is quite high naturally, as I allow the Lord to work that lower and lower, when self gets lower, well, that's when my faith starts getting higher. Because then I'm not believing in myself, I'm now believing in God and his ability. So as self goes down, faith goes up, and that's when I can see that surrender, it's not that it's just a whole lot more appealing, it's just a whole lot easier. It's so much easier for me to surrender to God's will, to His way, to His purpose, when self is not in the way. And so that is the obvious better pathway to go down. And the beautiful thing about that is, yes, circumstances and consequences can knock self down, but you can get there by choice. You can get there by saying, I'm purposefully and intentionally going to work on my concept of who I am and who God is. And I'm going to grow in my understanding of who He is so that I don't actually think that much of myself and think of myself in ways that I shouldn't. And when you are able to do that, well, then you can start making surrender not the last option, but you can make surrender the number one option. That could be the default. So instead of waiting until I've got nothing else left, I'm saying, I'm looking for opportunities where I can surrender first and say, here we go, Lord. Here's something that I want you to take control of. Here's something that, as difficult as what it might be to let go, I want to give it to you. Not when I'm forced to, but because I choose to. If you look at how God has used surrender, and we can play with the word surrender, and we can say, let's swap that out with faith. And say, that is, I'm going to believe, and I'm going to hand over, and I'm going to trust the process of surrender. Hebrews chapter 11, we used some of the verses in the previous message about without faith it is impossible to please God. And Hebrews chapter 11 it's known as the Hall of Faith. So it lists all of these incredible stories of how God has worked in the past, where He literally has said, well, I can. And if you look at the characters in Hebrews chapter 11, it starts with Abel and Enoch and Noah, where things were happening in their lives that they could not do. It was impossible. And then it goes on to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and you look at how God worked in their stories, and it's just absolutely incredible. And then you get to Joseph, and in Joseph's story, look at his circumstances, how he was the favorite and then betrayed by his brothers, and then his gutter was the bottom of a pit. And he thought, well, that's it, that's the bottom. And then he gets sold into slavery, and he's at Potiphar's house, and then he gets elevated again, and then meets a new gutter. And the new gutter was in prison. And then after prison, what happens? God shows him, well, Joseph, I know that you think that these are your options, but you don't know what I can do. And you don't know why I'm doing it. And then he gets elevated to second in charge over the most powerful nation of that time, Egypt. And ultimately, because of that, he saves his family. And through that, he saves the lineage of Christ, which is salvation for the whole world. And you're like, that's an incredible story of what God can do. And then after Joseph, you have Moses, and he has a similar story. He has a story where he's abandoned at birth. It's like, this story is not starting well. Like, the Hebrew children are being killed. This is genocide. It's terrible. And yeah, you have little Moses in the basket. He's abandoned, and then he gets adopted. But adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. So that he's going to play a role in this story that none of the other Hebrew children could ever have played. So even though it starts very difficult, then there's hope. Then ultimately Moses is in a situation where he commits murder and he's ashamed and he runs away into the desert. And there he finds his family. And he gets married and he has children and he thinks, well, this is it. So this is what life is going to be. And God says, Moses, no, the story's not over. Moses had no idea of what God was going to do. He had no idea that God was going to show him, well, Moses, this is what I can do. But you're going to have to go back to Egypt. And Moses is like, no, this is not the plan. Like every excuse in the book, like, I can't talk, I can't do this, I'm not a leader. And God says, yes, Moses, it's because I'm not asking you to do it in your strength. I want to show you that I can. And that ultimate story of Moses taking the entire nation of Israel out of Egypt, where they formed as a nation for the first time, through the wilderness to the promised land, parting the Red Sea, like it is incredible. Where God says, well, this is what I can do when you surrender to me. After Moses, the book of Hebrews chapter 11 speaks about David. And David's story, well, it does the same. He's the last, the youngest of the sons, and he wasn't getting attention. He was being used as a little shepherd boy. They even forgot about him. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the new king, it has to be a son of Jesse. They go through the whole line. They forget about David. Like, what does that mean? Like, so he has to say, is there no other son? Oh, there is one more. Yeah, go call him. And then, after being anointed as the king, so you're going to be the future king, David, back to the sheep. You're going to go look after the sheep again. Opportunity comes with Goliath, and it goes up. Wow, incredible. This is what God can do. And after that, well, then King Saul's trying to kill him. And he's running for his life, hiding in caves. So, and he's saying, what's the path here? And through all of that, that's where his heart is writing the Psalms. And it's so beautiful. It's not what David thought was going to happen, but it's God saying, well, this is what I can do. David had that same story of up and down. The same story of trying to do things in my own strength and then having to surrender. The beautiful picture in the New Testament is Saul, the enemy of Christianity, running around blaspheming against Christ and murdering Christians and throwing women and children into jail and doing everything that he can to stop this, because it's wrong. And then when the Lord appears to him and he says, Saul, no, there is a much bigger plan here. And I'm going to show you what I can do through you. And Saul's entire life is changed. And his name is changed. And he's the Apostle Paul. And he then is the apostle to the entire world, to all the Gentile nations, to bringing this incredible good news of God's grace and forgiveness and love to the whole world. Like, that's who he is. But it had to go through such an incredible journey where he had to realize it's not my strength. It's not what I can do. I need to surrender and allow God to do this. And if you look at the detail of each of those stories, I can't tell you what the exact answer is to your story and to your situation, because then you're asking me to be God. All I can say is we have to do the same. God is asking us, will you just let go? He's saying, but I can't because I don't have answers, and I can't because I have responsibilities, and I can't because it's unknown, and I can't because I'm scared, and I'm going to say, yes, no. So do you want to carry on doing that? Or do you want me to show you that I can? But I'm going to do it in a very different way. And that is the pathway of surrender, the pathway of faith. And it's the faith that pleases God, not the outcomes. And that's difficult when you are faced with your current situation and circumstances. And that really is the test. It's the test of your faith. And when you can say, well, I have to stop trying, and I have to say, Lord, I want you to be seen as the Lord, the one and only, true and living God who can do the impossible, who can do the things that I can't do, who can do the things that right now I'm worried about and I'm scared about. But I want to surrender to you so that when you do, and however you're going to do it, that I know without any shadow of a doubt that this is your work, not mine. Because after all, this is his story, not yours. And God is asking you to be a part of that story. And the way that you become a part of that story, of seeing what he can do, is by surrendering. And that is through circumstance, consequence, or choice. And ultimately, we want that to be by choice. To be able to say, Lord, your will be done, not my will. Father, thank you that you have shown throughout history, throughout so many people's lives, what you can do. And Father, that in each and every single one of those, it takes that ingredient of faith and that step of surrender, of letting go. Father, I pray for every person listening to this message, and I pray for their specific situations and the details of what they are facing. And I ask, Father, that they will let go, that they will pray that prayer of surrender to get to that point where Hezekiah says, I can't, but I know that you can, that you alone are Lord. Father, thank you that we know that your will ultimately is going to be done. And Father, that the surrender that we need to show in the details of our lives does not take away from the relationship that we have with you. Because that is the work that you have done in Christ, where you have shown what you can do for all of eternity. And Father, I pray that we will hold on to that security that we have and allow you to do the work that you want to do in and through us in the way that you want to, on your terms and in your time. May your will be done. As we thank you for all that you have done and all that you are still going to do. In Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest, and without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart.
Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness, oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness, oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll lean on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness.